Welcome to Cafe Tales. Tonight we journey to the sunlit hills of 1920s Andalusia, where Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings arrive for a joyous village wedding, only for it to be overshadowed by sudden tragedy. Amid almond blossoms and whispers of long-held grudges, a tangle of hidden passions begins to unravel. This is Blood in the Almond Groves, inspired by the true events of the Crimen de Níjar, which in turn sparked Federico García Lorca's Blood Wedding, a tale of love, secrets, and fatal choices crafted in homage to the timeless genius of Agatha Christie. Though this Spanish mystery is entirely our own. Before we commence this intriguing narrative, pray enlighten us in the comments. What precise activity occupies your little gray cells as you immerse yourself in this tale? Your presence truly fuels our journey through these shadowed mysteries. Before the story begins, I must confide something important. Cafe Tales exists because of you. Creating these stories, writing, narrating, illustrating, takes many hours of work. And direct listener support allows us to keep creating them to the standard you enjoy. If you enjoy these mysteries and wish for them to continue, please consider supporting by subscribing to our channel. Now, let the story unfold. Chapter 1. The Runaway Bride. It was during our brief sojourn in the south of Spain that Poirot and I encountered the affair of the runaway bride. Though runaway was far too simple a word for what happened, and bride scarcely covered the role she would play before the end. The village of San Sebastián de las Ves lay sprawled across a sun-baked hill, its whitewashed houses dazzling under the Andalusian sky. From the balcony of our host's house, I could see rooftops clambering toward the small stone church at the summit. Beyond it stretched a haze of almond blossoms, their pale pink shimmer broken only by the rugged ridges far in the distance. In the early mornings, a faint mist clung to the valleys, lifting slowly to reveal the sharp outline of the land and of a life lived under many watchful eyes. It seemed to my English sensibilities a place of perfect tranquility, the kind of village where the loudest disturbance might be the call of cicadas or the chime of the church bells. But Poirot, as always, was not deceived. "A village, mon ami," he once remarked, "is like a family. All its passions are contained in so small a place that they burn the more brightly. Here, pride and love, jealousy and vengeance, they cannot escape. They must consume or be consumed. We mighty had come there at the invitation of Senor Alvarez, an old acquaintance of Poirot from his days in Belgium, now retired to his birthplace after a long career in Madrid. His welcome was warm, his table excellent, and his promise of the most beautiful wedding you will ever see had persuaded me this trip would be a restful interlude in our otherwise unpredictable travels. The wedding was to unite Lucia Morales, daughter of one of the wealthiest farmers in the district, and Carlos Perez, heir to the southern almond groves. According to Senor Alvarez, the match was advantageous to both families. Yet in the way he said it, just a little too firmly, as though trying to convince himself, I sensed something beneath the polite enthusiasm. The morning dawned cloudless and golden. From the balcony, I heard the church bells rehearsing their jubilant clamor, women's voices calling across the narrow streets, and the clatter of mule hooves on cobbles. I remarked to Poirot, who was drinking his coffee with the precision of a man conducting an experiment, that all seemed set for a day of unmitigated happiness. "Do not tempt fate, Hastings," he said, one neat eyebrow lifting. "The day is yet young, and the air already tastes of secrets." Before I could answer, a sharp cry rose from below, not the cheerful chatter of moments earlier, but a note of distress. It was followed by an urgent male voice, then another, lower, as if delivering unwelcome news. Leaning over the balcony, I saw two elderly men gesturing heatedly, one pointing toward the hills beyond the village, the other toward the church. The set of their mouths was grim. "Maze, Hastings," Poirot murmured. "Observe how quickly joy makes way for curiosity, and curiosity for scandal." Moments later, Señor Alvarez appeared in the doorway. He had dressed with care, dark suit, polished shoes, a fresh carnation in his lapel, but his expression was troubled. "Señor Poirot, Capitan Hastings, there is terrible news. The bride has disappeared." "Disappeared?" I repeated. "Run away, you mean?" He spread his hands in the Spanish fashion, part resignation, part outrage. "So they say. Early this morning, before the bells, she was seen riding toward the hills with Miguel Cañadas." Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. "And who is Miguel Cañadas?" "The husband of her cousin Rosa," Alvarez said gravely. "It is, how do you say, a disgrace beyond words?" I let out a low whistle. "That's rather a scandal." "Scandal?" Alvarez's eyes flashed. "It is dishonor. For her family, for the groom, for the whole village." The marriage was to bind two houses that have not always been friends. Old disputes over land, water, pride. I asked what she was like, this Lucia Morales. Alvarez's expression softened in spite of his anger. "Beautiful, yes, but not in the way of the painted girls of the city. She has the beauty of someone who does not know she is watched, and the stubbornness of her grandfather, God rest him. She laughs rarely, but when she does, it is as if the whole courtyard hears it, and she does not forget either a kindness or a slight." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes thoughtful. "A young woman who remembers both love and grievance, Hastings. That is one to be cautious of." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And this Miguel, is he a man of great attraction?" Alvarez made a dismissive gesture. "Handsome, yes, but reckless. His farm is small. He and Lucia were close as children, perhaps too close. People notice such things, Señor Poirot." We descended into the street, which was already thick with knots of whispering villagers. Words floated to us. Vergüenza, shame, locura, madness. And from one woman in a fierce undertone, "Mejor así, better this way." Poirot paused to speak with an elderly villager seated in the shade. The exchange was brief but intense. Teyman's eyes darted toward the almond groves before he crossed himself. "The gentleman tells me," Poirot said as we walked on, "that the bride looked pale in recent days. Yesterday she was seen weeping in the olive grove. Curious, is it not, to flee on the one morning when all eyes are upon you?" Before I could reply, a boy came running, breathless. He blurted something to the crowd, and the ripple of alarm that followed told me it was no trivial news. Alvarez's face tightened. "They have found Carlos Perez, dead, stabbed in his own grove." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Ah, blood among the blossoms. And now, Hastings, we shall see whether this wedding was doomed only by love or by something far older." Chapter 2. Among the Blossoms. We followed Señor Alvarez up the winding street toward the southern edge of the village where the almond groves began. The bells in the church tower had fallen silent, as though stunned by the news, and the cheerful preparations of the morning were replaced by a tense hush. People stood in doorways watching us pass, their faces a mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and in some cases an emotion I could not at once define. The almond groves of Carlos Perez were extensive, laid out in neat rows that descended the slope toward the river. The trees were heavy with pale pink blossoms, and as we entered among them, the air was sweet with their scent. It was difficult to reconcile such beauty with the knowledge that it concealed something as ugly as murder. We had not gone far when we saw them, a cluster of men standing on the narrow dirt path, their dark clothes stark against the soft haze of petals drifting from the branches. One of the men in the dark green uniform of the Guardia Civil stepped forward and raised a hand. "Señor Alvarez, señores." His tone was courteous but firm. "This is Señor Poirot," Alvarez said quickly, "from Belgium. He is, how do you say, an expert in such matters." The guard looked doubtful but moved aside. "You may look, but do not touch." Carlos Perez lay sprawled on his back across the path. His wedding attire, a pale suit, white shirt, and crimson tie, had been chosen with care, but now lay rumpled and stained. One sleeve was torn at the seam. His eyes were half closed, and on his breast, just above the heart, was a dark patch where the blood had soaked through the linen. Poirot knelt with surprising grace for a man of his age, studying the body without disturbing it. His eyes moved from the face to the clothing, to the position of the limbs, and then to the ground around us. "You observe, Hastings," he murmured. "The soles of the shoes are dusty. Yet, there is a smear of mud at the left heel. The earth here is perfectly dry. That mud must have been acquired elsewhere. And note, there is no trail of it leading away." I glanced down. "So he walked from somewhere damp and then came here?" "Or," Poirot said softly, "he was brought here and laid down in this spot." The Guardia Civil officer frowned at us but made no comment. I took in the rest of the scene. Petals clung to the body, though the breeze was scattering them everywhere. To one side of the path, I noticed a trampled patch where the grass and earth had been disturbed, as though several people had stood there recently. Beyond it, the branches of an almond tree drooped low, their blossoms bruised and broken. From the far side of the grove, a woman approached, her head covered with a black shawl despite the warm sun. She was young and striking, with the dark eyes and proud carriage of the region. She came straight up to us and looked down at the body. "Dios mío, Carlos," she whispered, crossing herself. "This is Rosa Cañadas," Señor Alvarez murmured to me. "The cousin of the bride and the wife of Miguel." Rosa's gaze moved from Carlos to Poirot as though assessing him. "You are here to find the truth." "That is my profession, señora," Poirot replied gently. "You knew him well." She pressed her lips together. "Well enough. He was to marry my cousin. And now, Dios mío, the shame this will bring." She looked at Carlos's body for a long moment, longer than courtesy required. "He was not a man easily matched," she said at last, her voice steady but low. Then, glancing toward the village, she added, "Lucia was never made for him. She would have clipped his wings." "Where were you this morning?" Poirot asked. Her eyes widened, slightly. "In my house. I heard the bells begin for the wedding. Then they stopped and a neighbor came to tell me." She gestured toward the body. "Everyone is asking about Miguel. I do not know where he is. I have not seen him since yesterday." Poirot inclined his head. "I thank you, señora." She hesitated, then looked past us toward the village. "You should speak to Isabella Morales, Lucia's sister. She will know more than she admits." When she had gone, I said, "What do you make of that, Poirot?" She sounded almost relieved. "Ah, Hastings," Poirot replied thoughtfully. "Relief is a sentiment with many causes. Sometimes it comes from the ending of a danger. Sometimes from the prospect of a new beginning." We moved further down the path where the trampled grass led, toward a low stone wall marking the grove's edge. Beyond it lay a narrow track, and beside that a wooden gate hanging crooked on its hinges. Poirot bent to examine the latch. Fresh scratches, he murmured. It has been opened in haste, perhaps even forced, and here in the dust the print of a mule's hoof. Miguel's mule, perhaps, I suggested. Possibly, Poirot said, but let us not be too certain, my friend. There is more than one mule in San Sebastian de las. A shout from behind us made us turn. One of the villagers was waving a small object in his hand. Poirot took it carefully in his handkerchief. It was a silver watch chain, broken at one end. Curious, Poirot remarked. The body does not wear a watch, and the chain was found some distance away. Why should the killer trouble to remove such a thing? To rob him? Poirot smiled faintly. Or to give the appearance of robbery. There is a distinction. We remained among the blossoms a little longer, Poirot turning slowly as though committing to memory the arrangement of trees, the path, and the trampled earth. Then he straightened. Come, Hastings. We must speak to the sister of the bride, and, perhaps, he added softly, to the priest. In such matters, truth is often found where confession and gossip meet. Chapter 3. The Bride's Sister. The Morales house stood at the far end of a narrow lane, its whitewashed walls glowing in the midday sun. A low wall enclosed a small courtyard where a pomegranate tree cast mottled shade over the flagstones. The stillness of the place was deceptive. Behind it, I sensed a watchfulness, as though the house itself was listening to the whispers that now threaded through the village. Señor Alvarez rapped sharply on the heavy wooden door. A moment passed before it swung inward, revealing a young woman with black hair coiled neatly at the nape of her neck. Her dark, alert eyes took in Poirot, myself, and Alvarez in a glance so swift it seemed instinctive. This is Isabella Morales, Alvarez said, Lucia's younger sister. Señorita, Poirot said with a slight bow, we are grateful that you receive us at such a moment. I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my friend Captain Hastings. You have heard of what has happened. A quick, brittle laugh escaped her. Who has not? The bells stopped. The people ran. And now the whole village says, my sister has disgraced us forever. She stepped back, motioning us inside. And Carlos? Her voice caught, and she let the sentence trail into silence. We followed her into a sitting room where the cool, whitewashed walls were hung with family photographs and a large, brightly painted crucifix. She gestured for us to sit, but remained, standing, her hands clasped tightly before her. Poirot's gaze traveled slowly around the room. You were to be at the church early this morning, I think. I was, she said shortly, but the neighbors came with the news before I could leave. And your sister, I last saw her last night. We shared a room. She was quiet, but she would not say what troubled her. I woke before dawn, and her bed was empty. She looked down at her clasped hands. I thought she had gone early to the church to prepare. For a moment, Isabella's gaze drifted toward the shuttered window, as if picturing her sister's face. Lucia is careful with her words. She will stand in silence until she knows exactly how they will fall. Some think it is shyness, but it is not. She watches, always watching. Poirot made a small sound of approval. The observer, mon ami, often sees more than those who are observed. Your opinion of Señor Perez? Poirot asked gently. She lifted her chin. My opinion? He was proud. Too proud. He liked to speak as though he were granting my sister an honor. He had charm, yes, but it was the charm of a man who believes himself in command. That is not affection, I remarked. Her eyes flashed, briefly. Affection is a luxury. In this village, marriage is often an arrangement of land, water, and alliances. My sister. She wanted more. Poirot inclined his head slightly. And did she ever speak to you of Miguel Cañadas? A pause, too long for a simple no, before she said, They have known each other since childhood. People notice such things, but it means nothing. And yet, Poirot said softly, Your cousin's husband was seen riding with her this morning. Her mouth tightened. If she went with Miguel, it was to be far from here. Perhaps he was the only one willing to help her. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier. Outside, a dove cooed lazily from the courtyard. Before Poirot could speak again, there was a knock at the open door. An elderly woman in a black dress and lace mantilla entered, her back straight despite her years. She spoke rapidly to Isabella, her voice urgent and low. She says, Alvarez translated, that Father Mateo wishes to see you at once, Senor Poirot. He has something private to tell. Poirot rose, but his gaze lingered on Isabella. One last question, Senorita. This morning, after you saw your sister's bed empty, did you hear anything unusual? A voice, perhaps? Footsteps? For a moment she was silent, then quietly, I lay awake. Perhaps an hour later, I heard footsteps in the courtyard. Two people walking quickly, one heavier tread, one lighter, a man and a woman, I think, but I did not look out. Poirot inclined his head. Merci, señorita. You have been most helpful. As we stepped into the street, I said, in a low voice, She's hiding something. May we, Hastings? Poirot replied thoughtfully. She hides something indeed. But is it her own secret or another's? That is what we must decide. For now, we follow the path of those footsteps, wherever they may lead. Father Mateo waited in the shade of the church doorway, hands clasped, his expression grave. He led us inside, the heavy door closed behind, shutting out the heat and the low murmur of the plaza. The air within was cool, faintly scented with beeswax and incense. Shafts of light from narrow windows struck the motes of dust into gold. What I tell you, he began, is not from the confessional. I am bound there. Butin the past days I have seen and heard enough to trouble me. Lucia Morales came to me 3 times this week. She asked for prayers, for clarity and for deliverance from a burden. Poirot leaned forward slightly. Did she say from whom or from what this burden came? No, the priest said, shaking his head. Only that she was expected to do something she did not wish to do, and that refusing might bring danger to others. Danger to others? I repeated. Father Mateo, the priest said simply. 2 nights ago, I saw Carlos Perez in the sacristy after evening prayers. He was in high spirits, but there was a possessiveness in his manner when he spoke of the marriage, as though it were an acquisition. Did you see them together? Poirot asked. That same evening, in the plaza. They were not quarreling, but neither were they tender. There was an edge in their voices, though I could not hear the words. He paused, eyes lifting briefly to the crucifix at the altar. This morning, before the bells began, I saw a figure moving toward the almond groves. The light was poor, and I cannot swear to whom it was. The shape and height suggested a man. He wore a hat. Could it have been Miguel Cañadas? I asked. Many men here wear hats, the priest replied. Until I knew more, I told no one. Gossip in summer is like wildfire. Once begun, it cannot be contained. Poirot inclined his head. You have been most helpful, Padre. It is often in the quiet words of a man of God that the truth first stirs. We stepped back into the sunlit plaza. I said, "So now we have Isabella hearing footsteps and the priest seeing a man go toward the groves before the bells. It sounds rather damning for Miguel." Poirot shook his head gently. "My dear Hastings, you arrange the pieces too quickly. The picture is not yet complete, and sometimes the first pieces placed are the wrong ones." He glanced toward the distant almond trees. "Nevertheless, we have learned this. The heart that hesitates can be driven, and the village that watches can destroy. Between the two, a very little spark will suffice." He set his hat at the precise angle he favored. "Come, we will follow where the spark has fallen." Chapter 4. The Lace in the Dust. The almond groves lay quieter than before, as though the afternoon heat had pressed all life into stillness. The blossoms shimmered in the sunlight, their perfume heavy in the air. Yet beneath the beauty there was unease. The knowledge that one of the village's most prominent men had died here, and that the murderer might still be walking under the same falling petals. The Guardia Civil had concluded their first examination and withdrawn to the grove's edge, leaving the body covered with a plain cloth, awaiting the doctor from Almeria. A few villagers lingered under the outermost trees, voices low and guarded, eyes flicking toward us when they thought we were not looking. Now and then I caught a word. "Novia." "Huyo Cornudo, the bride. She fled with him." Poirot paused where Carlos had been found, gazing down at the dust and the trampled earth with a kind of precise reverence, as though it were the floor of a ballroom, and he was studying the pattern of a dance. He bent, picking up a fallen almond, blossom between finger and thumb. "Regard, Hastings. How delicate, how perfect, until it is bruised. Murder is much the same. The blow is brutal, but what betrays the killer is the small damage left behind." I glanced toward a patch of disturbed earth to the right of the path. A branch hung low there, several blossoms broken and scattered. "Looks like a struggle to me," I suggested. "Or someone standing very still," Poirot replied, waiting for the right moment to step forward. He moved toward the branch. That was when I saw it. A scrap of white caught on the rough bark, fluttering faintly in the breeze. Poirot produced his handkerchief and plucked it free. It was a torn piece of fine lace, the kind used in a bridal mantilla. The edges were frayed. One corner bore a faint brown stain. "Blood?" I asked. "Not from the wound to Carlos. It has dried too long for that," Poirot said. "Note the weave. Fine. Delicate, expensive. Not the sort of lace a man like Miguel Cañadas would buy for his wife, but for a bride." I tried to picture her in the lace, veiled, walking between the rows of almond trees toward a wedding she did not want. There was something unsettling about the thought. Was it Miguel she imagined at the altar instead, or some freedom neither man could give her? In the still air of the grove, her absence felt almost like a presence, the silent note in a song you could not stop hearing. "You think it's Lucia?" It is possible. Or it belonged to someone who wished it to appear so. He folded the lace into his pocket with the care of a man handling a rare manuscript. A sound behind us made me turn. Rosa Cañada stood there, her black shawl drawn tight about her shoulders. I could not tell how long she had been watching. "You should not be here," she said, voice low but carrying. "On the contrary, Senora," Poirot replied with a slight bow. "It is exactly here that I should be. The truth often lingers where death has been." Her eyes moved briefly to the covered body, then to the branch where the lace had been caught. "You are looking for the truth. Be careful, Senor Poirot. In this place, truth can be more dangerous than lies. And for some of us—" She paused, her gaze flicking back toward the covered body. "For some of us, there are truths we could not bear to live with." There was a pause. Poirot regarded her steadily, and for the first time she shifted her weight. Before we could answer, she turned and walked toward the village, her figure soon lost among the trees. "Well, that was ominous," I muttered. Poirot smiled faintly. "People rarely warn you without reason, Hastings, but observe what is absent. No one here speaks of the bride and Miguel as if they might be innocent. They have already been judged. That, too, is dangerous." From beyond the grove came the slow toll of a bell, not the jubilant peal that should have marked a wedding, but a measured, somber note. It hung in the warm air like an accusation. Poirot folded the delicate lace carefully into his pocket and adjusted his hat. "Come, mon ami. The shadows grow long, and we must speak to the doctor. The dead, I find, are often more truthful than the living." Chapter 5. The Doctor's Opinion. The doctor from Almeria was a compact, wiry man in his 40s, with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes that missed very little. He knelt beside the covered body without ceremony, motioning to the Guardia Civil to lift the cloth. "Cause of death is not in question," he said briskly, parting the fabric to reveal the wound. "A single thrust to the heart. Narrow blade, most likely a knife from a kitchen or a workman's tool." Poirot crouched beside him, tilting his head to better see the angle. "From the front?" "Yes. Clean. The killer was close, very close, and trusted. There are no defensive wounds." "So either he knew the hand that held the knife," Poirot observed, "or he was taken entirely by surprise." "And the time of death?" The doctor consulted his watch. "Between 5 and 6 o'clock this morning, certainly no later." I started. But the bells didn't stop until well after 8. That's when the boy came running to say he'd been found. The doctor gestured toward a faint smear of dried mud on the cuff. "See here, that came from dew on the grass just after sunrise. Later in the morning it would already have dried to dust, rigor acid in the jaw and fingers." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "So Carlos lay here 4 hours before anyone came?" "Exactly." The Guardia Civil officer listening nearby said sharply, "Everyone knows Miguel left with the girl. And where is she now? Disappeared. It is enough." Poirot's tone was mild, but his glance keen. "Enough for suspicion?" "Yes. Enough for certainty?" "No. If they killed him before dawn, why wait until the village was awake to flee? Would it not be wiser to vanish at once?" The officer shrugged. "Perhaps they argued. Perhaps they hid. Or perhaps," Poirot said softly, "they were not here at all when he died." The doctor packed away his instruments. "You will have my written report by this evening." From the grove, Poirot led me to the Morales house, not to see Isabella again, but the housekeeper, Doña Inés. She was a plump woman with strong forearms and an expression that suggested she knew everyone's business before they did. "I rose at 5, she said, arms folded. "Bread to bake. The ovens must be hot before the sun warms the kitchen. I saw Señorita Lucia once. She came in for water just past 5. She wore a plain shawl, not her wedding clothes, looked distracted, did not speak." Poirot's voice was quiet. "Did you see her leave the house?" I turned to the ovens. When I looked again, she was gone. "Did she often fetch water herself?" "Not on her wedding day, senor. That is why I remember." From there, we went to the Perez household, where Carlos had lived with his unmarried sister, Pilar. Heavy curtains shrouded the room in gloom. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but there was nothing unfocused about her gaze. My brother rose early, she said. I heard him moving before the bells of 6. He told me he was going to the grove to check the irrigation channels for the photographs later. Her voice caught. That was the last I saw of him alive. Poirot inclined his head. He seemed anxious, angry? No, proud, I think. But there was something in his manner. A determination, as if he had decided on something important. A decision involving the wedding? Poirot asked. Pilar's eyes flickered toward the mantelpiece where a silver-framed photograph of Lucia stood. Spoke of ending the engagement, but he changed his mind. Her lips compressed. I think my brother's life might have been better had he kept his first decision. Our final call was to the farm hands who worked the almond groves. We found 2 of them in the shade of a wall, shelling almonds into a basket. Carlos came by before sunrise. One said, We were at the lower row. He asked if we'd seen anyone. We told him no. Then he went toward the higher grove. Did you see him meet anyone? Poirot asked. The man shook his head. No, senor. But soon after we heard voices far off. One was a man's, the other, he hesitated. The other was sharp, a woman's voice like when someone is angry. Poirot's mustaches twitched. And the time? When the sun just touched the hilltops, the second man added. We thought nothing of it. But now, he shrugged. As we walked away from the farm hands, I said, 2 sets of voices, 2 sets of footsteps, all pointing to Lucia and Miguel again. Poirot shook his head slowly. Or to someone who wishes it to point to them, mon ami. The obvious is the most convenient hiding place for the truth. He adjusted his cuffs thoughtfully. There are 3 people, Hastings, whose words this morning were careful, too careful. Pilar Perez, Rosa Cañadas, and Father Mateo. Each told us something. Useful, and each left something unsaid. You think they're lying? Not necessarily lying, but they have truths they prefer to keep hidden. And when a person hides one truth, it is often because it is bound to another. His mustaches twitched. Tomorrow I shall speak to them again. The same. Questions, perhaps, but in a different order, and with the knowledge I did not have today. You will see, mon ami. The answers will not be the same. Chapter 6. Shadows in the Sacristy. The sacristy was cool and dim, the faint scent of incense clinging to carved cupboards and polished brass candlesticks. Father Mateo stood by a narrow table, a silver chalice in his hands. Light from the high window caught the lines in his face and the gray in his hair. Senor Poirot, Capitan Hastings, he greeted us. I have been thinking about our earlier conversation. Poirot removed his hat and gloves with slow precision. And your thoughts, Padre? They lead you where? Toward clarity or toward more shadows? The priest hesitated, then set down the chalice. 2 nights ago, Carlos came to confession. I cannot tell you the words spoken there. That is sacred. But afterwards, in the courtyard, he lingered. He asked me, if a man has sworn to keep a secret that could destroy another, is he bound before God to keep it? And your answer? Poirot prompted gently. That truth and mercy are sometimes at odds, that one must weigh the harm in speaking against the harm in silence. Did he name the person this secret concerned? No, Father Mateo said slowly, but his face was troubled, and there was a heaviness in his voice. When he left, I thought I saw a figure waiting near the church gate. A woman? She pulled her shawl over her head and turned away before I could speak. You are certain it was a woman? The walk was light, the build slight. That is all I can say. He hesitated. I have also seen Lucia and Miguel together in the olive groves before the engagement was announced. Always speaking closely, not always smiling. Was it love, do you think? Poirot asked. The priest's eyes dropped to the chalice. If it was the kind that makes saints or ruins, and in my experience, it is more often the latter. Outside in the sun, I could not shake the image. Father Mateo had painted Lucia in the olive grove with Miguel, speaking closely, sometimes without smiles. There was intimacy there, yes, but also tension, as though their bond carried a weight neither could set down. Love, I thought, was not always light. Sometimes it pressed on you like a hand at your throat. We left the church and crossed the plaza to the Cañadas' home. Rosa received us in her vine-shaded courtyard, the black shawl loose over her shoulders. She looked every inch the composed wife, but her eyes held a watchfulness that spoke of calculation. I do not know where Miguel is, she said before Poirot could speak. You seem calm for a woman whose husband is missing the same morning a man is murdered, Poirot remarked mildly. Her eyes flashed. I am calm because panic solves nothing. If Miguel is guilty, you will find him, Señor Poirot. And if it is Lucia who has driven him to it, well, no one will be surprised. Poirot tilted his head. Why speak of Lucia, Señora? We were discussing you. Because she is the reason for all this, Rosa said sharply. Carlos should have chosen better. Poirot's gaze drifted to the washing line where two men's shirts hung to dry. Miguel's? Yes. You washed them today? I washed them early, she replied. The village talks enough without my linen hanging all day. And they say other things, Poirot added gently, that your husband has run off with your cousin. A small, dry smile touched her mouth. They will say what entertains them. If Lucia has taken Miguel, then she has taken a burden as well as a man. She has always had a taste for claiming what is not hers. Strong words for family, I remarked. Her eyes flicked to mine. Family, yes, but not a friend. So you were awake when he departed? Her lips tightened. I saw no one leave. The shirts were already in the basket. If you think I am hiding something, Señor Poirot, say it plainly. Poirot smiled faintly. I am more interested in what these shirts tell me than in your words. The cuffs bear traces of almond blossom. Petals do not fall into a laundry basket by accident. A flicker crossed her face, quickly smoothed away. The whole village is dusted with petals in spring. Perhaps I brushed past a branch. Perhaps, Poirot said, eyes never leaving hers. Tell me, Señora, do you love your husband? The question seemed to take her aback. He is my husband. That is not an answer. Her gaze hardened. Love is not for everyone. Some marriages are built on something else. Survival, protection. That is all I will say. As we left the courtyard, Poirot murmured, She speaks of Lucia with a heat one does not expect from a mere cousin by marriage. There is history there, Hastings, and when history is personal, it is rarely impartial. From the Cañadas' home, Poirot led me once again to the Perez house. Pilar received us in the same dim parlor where we had sat before, but this time she did not bother with pleasantries. You have more questions, she said, her tone steady rather than welcoming. Poirot inclined his head. We do, madame. We spoke earlier of the wedding. Now I wish to know of your brother's state of mind these past days, particularly regarding the rumors about Señorita Morales and Miguel Cañadas. Pilar's lips thinned. The whole village whispers about them. Carlos heard it as well, He did not like being made a fool, least of all in public. And yet he proceeded with the marriage, Poirot observed. Why? Her gaze flicked to the curtained window. Because pride is not always about avoiding humiliation. Sometimes it's about proving you can endure it and still claim what you believe is yours. Poirot studied her face. Did your brother truly love Lucia, do you think? She hesitated. Carlos loved possession, the land, the groves, the house, and yes, perhaps the bride. But there was one thing he valued even more, and that was... Pilar's hands tightened in her lap. Loyalty. He could forgive many things, but betrayal was not among them. Poirot's gaze sharpened. A dangerous quality in a man who discovers it too late. She said nothing more, and after a moment Poirot rose. Merci, madame. You have helped me more than you think. Chapter 7. Blood in the Almond Groves. By late afternoon, the air in San Sebastián de las was heavy, the almond blossoms drooping in the heat. The village seemed to be holding its breath. Word had spread that Hercule Poirot had summoned the key players in the tragedy to the parish hall at 7 o'clock. When we arrived, chairs had been set in a semicircle beneath the high windows, the evening light casting long shadows across the flagstones. Present were Father Mateo, Pilar Perez, Rosa Cañadas, Isabella Morales, and the officer from the Guardia Civil. Miguel and Lucia were still absent, their whereabouts unknown. Poirot took his place at the front, the light catching on the polish of his shoes. He let the silence deepen until the faint shuffling of feet ceased. Señoras, señores, he began. We are here because a man lies dead among the almond blossoms, and the truth lies tangled among the petals. The story the village tells is simple. That Carlos Perez was killed by Miguel Cañadas in league with Lucia Morales. It is neat. Yes, too neat. When the truth is tidy, I become suspicious. He looked from face to face. The doctor tells us Carlos died between 5 and 6 o'clock in Baum. The morning, long before Miguel and Lucia were said to have fled. This alone should give us pause. Pilar sat forward. Then who? If not Miguel, who? Patience, madame. We must begin with what Carlos did that morning. He left his home early, telling his sister he was going to the grove. There, 2 farm hands heard voices, a man's and a woman's. The man, I think, was Carlos. The woman, not Lucia. She was seen in her kitchen by Doña Inés at that time, wearing a plain shawl, and not Isabella. She was still at home, though she later heard footsteps. He turned to Rosa. And not you, señora. At least so you told me. No. Madam, you were in the grove. I have the lace from the almond branch. Bridal lace, yes, but not from Lucia's mantilla as she wore it to be fitted. This piece was torn from her wedding veil after you took it from her wardrobe. You wore it that morning. Not in innocence, but as a token. And on your husband's shirts, washed so very early, were not only petals, but the yellow dust of almond pollen. You laundered them because they had brushed against the blossoms when you left the grove. Her face remained still, but her hands twisted in her lap as if they could wring the truth away. Why? Pilar demanded. Why would you kill Carlos? Poirot's gaze did not waver. Because you loved him, not as a cousin by marriage, but with the fierce love of a woman who believes she is the rightful choice. You thought he would come to you. And when you learned he would not, when he told you the marriage to Lucia would go ahead, you could not bear it. You lured him to the grove. The farm hands heard your voice, sharp, wounded, and when he would not change his mind, you struck. The room held its breath. Rosa's lips trembled, then firmed. Her voice, when it came, was low but burning. He told me Miguel was nothing to him, that he could have me if he wished, but he would not give up Lucia. He kept me close enough to feed my hope, but far enough to keep his pride. And I was to be the second choice. I am no one's second choice. Hiss of shock ran through the room. Poirot's voice was quiet. So you killed him, and let the village destroy Miguel and Lucia with its gossip. They would be cast out, disgraced, and you, madame, would remain, your passion buried with Carlos, your pride untouched. The Guardia Civil officer stepped forward. Rosa rose without protest, her eyes fixed on some point far beyond the room as they led her away. Later, as we crossed the square, almond blossoms drifted down in the cooling air. I said, "So all the while it wasn't the lovers at all." "No, Hastings," Poirot said gently. "It was not the love that everyone could see that killed Carlos. It was the love that hid in the shadows, and the pride that would sooner destroy than surrender. That, mon ami, is the most dangerous passion of all." Epilogue: The Almond Trees. In bloom. 2 weeks later, the village had returned to its uneasy routine. The scandal was now spoken of only in low voices, the way one speaks of an illness that has passed but left its mark. Rosa awaited trial in the city. Carlos lay in the earth, and Miguel and Lucia had yet to return. One evening, as the sun slid down behind the hills, a letter arrived at Whitehaven for Poirot. The paper was creased, the ink slightly blurred, as though it had been written in haste, and carried far. Poirot read it in silence, then handed it to me. "Me, Senor Poirot. By now you will know the truth, and perhaps you have guessed the rest. We did not run because we were guilty of Carlos's death. We ran because we feared we might be separated before we could be together. My engagement to Carlos had been a bargain struck between families, not hearts. Miguel and I had loved each other in silence for years, each believing it impossible. When Carlos died, the village would never believe in our innocence, and the gossip would poison what we had. We left that morning not to escape justice, but to claim the small piece of happiness that might still be ours. If you tell the village where we are, they will drag us back into their quarrels. Better that they think us gone forever. Know only that we are safe and that we are free. Yours with respect." Lucia Morales looked up. "So they did love each other all along." Poirot smiled faintly. "We, Hastings. But theirs was a love that waited, that endured without striking. It is not the loud love that makes the gossip of cafes, but the quiet one that survives the years, in shadows." We stood at the window, the evening breeze carrying the scent of our own small garden. Somewhere beyond the hills, I imagined Miguel and Lucia walking between rows of almond trees, their hands brushing, their voices low. The blossoms would fall around them like snow, the petals catching in Lucia's hair, a crown no one could take from her, and so concludes Blood in the Almond Groves. If you've listened this far, you are the heartbeat of Cafe Tales. Without you, your comments, your shares, your support, these stories would simply fade into silence. Your support is the reason Poirot's cases, Hastings' voice, and the shadows of these mysteries continue to reach listeners across the world. Thank you for walking these dark, winding paths with us. Until our next tale, good night.